Welcome back to my channel, Mindful Connections. Carrie Marie here and special guest Kirk Heiner. He's written several books already, 2 of them, right?
Yep.
And you've got one on the way. And the new, what was the first 2? You've got...
First one was on King Solomon. It was a Solomon Code of Success, most successful person that ever lived. The second one was on sales mastery, so it's called Unlocking the Sales Superstar Inside You.
Awesome.
And the third one is called 10x Your Communication.
Right.
To develop communication mastery.
Because that is so important, and honestly, it's should be a focus because you're a professional and you see in your professional life how important communication is, how it can break down, how it can be successful, and along many different platforms of professional life. So with that, we wanted to go ahead and discuss your book a little bit about the importance of 10 times communication, or 10x communication. And I think this is a very relevant topic, especially in this time, because, you know, we're visiting family and it's the holidays, and how often do we visit family with all the best intentions and yet communication can break down?
Exactly.
So...
Well, communication affects every single aspect of our lives. It affects everything. It affects our relationships, it affects our marriages, it affects our rearing of our kids, it affects our ability to get a job, to advance in that career. It's the single number one attribute that is used to promote people. So if you want to be in a higher level at your work, the single greatest thing you can do is improve your communication. And we generally have no idea how to do that.
Right, because I mean, we're taught, communicate better, and we're taught a few principles in life. We're given good caveats of, you know, be nice to that person and things like that. But really breaking it down and helping us learn how to communicate better. So
well, it's kind of like telling somebody who wants to be an Olympic athlete, just run faster. And that doesn't get you there. Somebody has to say, okay, here's how you start, and here's how you keep going. And if it's a marathon, here's how you stay longer. Maybe you go slower to begin with. Yeah. So I start with the concept that, number one, communication affects every single aspect of our lives, right? Every single one of us can upgrade our communication. But then what does that mean? What if we do it? What happens? And then what if we don't do it? What happens? Well, we'll stay exactly where we are, getting basically the same results we're getting.
Right.
But I've been studying this for 10 years. The first book took about 1.5 years. The next one took another maybe year. This one's taken 10 years because it's complicated and simple at the same time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I still remember when I first started out college and I took this interpersonal communications class. I was just blown away. I'm like, why are we not teaching this?
Right. At every school.
At a younger age.
Every single person would benefit, and the whole culture would benefit. The country would benefit. The world would benefit by improving our communication. And we'd get more of what we want out of life.
Exactly. So what are some key concepts that you're going to be going over in your book? So
there are about 10 of the big rocks, I'll say. These are the big pillars that you need to think about. Well, one of them is to simply say less. That's a really powerful one. You'll actually communicate more. There's a proverb that says, in the abundance of communication, or abundance of words, the message is lost. So I see people go on and on about a topic, and they've actually finished, and they keep going. And a simple example of that is at churches. But why is a talk 45 minutes long? What's the proper amount? They say if you don't know the topic, then you'll go long. But if you understand a topic, you have 20 minutes, you should be able to explain it all.
So straight and to the point.
Right.
Which, you know, honestly, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus, because that's the whole point of this channel, is to lead by example, and to, you know, I'm working on myself too, and learning how to communicate my message with shorter words. Crisp,
clear, simple. There's a president of a bank that I was speaking with, and she said her father, who had founded the bank, and she was now president of this bank, she says on her desk she had basically a simple little saying that said, be brief, be brilliant, be gone. Get in, state your point, and get out, and then I'll make a decision. Well,
people's time is valuable. So
right, and it's honoring their time.
Well, and if you have so much to do in life, and you're like, I'm really interested in this, but then you've got this clock that times out where you're like, I've really got to get to these other things.
Right.
So.
Well, and it's like a famous movie line where, Renee Zellweger says to Tom Cruise at the door, she says, you had me at hello. And he kept blathering.
Okay, quiet down.
Right?
Yeah.
So the first one is be brief. Be crystal clear. Take the time. In fact, Mark Twain said, I'd have written you a shorter letter if I had the time. It takes more time to trim the fat off of our conversation. You have to think about it. And another one that's very important is be the last one to speak in a group. Why? Why would you do that? Well, one, it gives you the chance to hear what everybody else says, right? The other thing is when people hold back their commentary, they actually come across as more wise. So the wiser elders will be the last to speak generally. So that's when we always want to be the first to talk instead of the last.
Right. I can see that. It's, every movie that they've got that wise elder that's listening to a group and you're to make a decision, they're just sitting here calmly.
Right.
And then they wait a minute. Once everybody's finished, they pause for a minute because it shows reflection. It shows the wisdom to really think about what they're going to say.
Exactly.
And then they say what they're going to say.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So that's a big one. And then probably the single most powerful concept I've taught on in the area of communication was one that I'd written an article about. And I have about 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. And it just went viral. We had 11,000 views. I have 10,000 followers. I don't know how we got 11,000 views. And then out of that, I think it was 80% gave a like to it, which is just bizarre. You might get 10%. When you get 80, it's just bizarre. Right. Another couple of thousand shares, and some of those shares were with their entire corporation of multiple thousands of people. And it was on topic of listening.
Oh, see, that's important.
That's when every one of us, including me, can learn to do better. Because God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? We should listen twice as much as we speak. And when we're listening, we're intaking input and information so that we're stronger and better. But when we're spilling it out, we're just giving it to others, hopefully something wise and good. But we're going to personally benefit more from listening. Plus, we'll understand them, which is one of Solomon's 3 keys for success. Understanding is huge. And if we're just sitting, like most people are, ready to talk, where we're just waiting for our turn to talk, we're not really listening to them. If we can listen to them, we'll understand them better, so that when we do speak, we have something important and valuable to offer them.
I like that. It's, and that makes sense, because sometimes I will give myself a self-guilt, like, okay, I need to be saying stuff because of the platform I'm on. But in reality, I trust my gut in the fact that it's like, no, just sit and listen, because there's things that I'm learning and researching and paying attention, because I am not the wisest person here. No, this part of why I'm doing this is because I know how many of us are really in this boat. We need to be able to share knowledge when it's valuable, but making sure that we have the right way to express it.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. I
so
like
one
that.
of the other extremely important parts of communication that we weren't taught in school, no matter, even if you went to private school, you didn't get this, is that 90% of our arguments have nothing to do with the words. It generally doesn't even have to do with the topic. It has to do with your tone. It has to do with the tone in our voice. Because you can curse somebody by saying the word peanut butter. Right? How about this when you go, right? Or whatever. My favorite one is whatever. I actually told a friend of mine, when you say the word whatever, you're basically dropping the F-bomb. It's like blank you, whatever. It's really disregarding. So don't ever use it, whatever. But it's the tone more, the word's bad. The tone is worse.
Oh, and that actually makes a lot of sense. That's something that we learned in the interpersonal communications and in speech, is that, you can say, and I'll use an example, is like, this was the best example that stuck with me because it's simple and straight to the point, is you can say, I love you, or you can say, I love you, and it's going to communicate completely differently. And wouldn't you say that sometimes our tone, backed up with that interpretation, with the causing the offense that gets that rile up.
And then it puts people into that fight or flight mode.
Exactly.
So they either want to walk away from you, which is not a good thing for communicating, because communication means to come together with unity.
And how often does this happen in arguments with family, especially family, even friends? But you can do that with, obviously, like you mentioned, it can happen in any kind of interaction.
Exactly. But the simple, most powerful part of this is that it's simple to learn. Almost nobody will. So that puts us at a great advantage, because almost nobody's going to work on this. And honestly, what I found in studying for the book over the last decade is I studied almost everything, both reading and videos and everything that's out there. And I've watched PhDs talk on the topic. And 97% of it all is garbage. It's stuff from the 80s, guys in leisure suits and long lapels saying, conflict resolution, here's what you need to do. Well, if you're already in the conflict, it's a little too deep, it's a little too late to learn how to communicate well. You shouldn't be trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's why they say put a pause on it.
Right.
Take a break and then circle back.
Right. Another powerful point is saying things that are sticky. In other words, things that stick. That's why being simple, being clear, using visual word language, that's a really powerful one. Instead of just saying, that upsets me, people can't grab hold of that. We think in pictures in our brain. So if you said, when you do that, it makes me feel like a whipped puppy tied to a tree. Oof. And there's another part of what I just did in that, is the word tied to a tree.
Right.
It's alliterated, right? It's like Dixie Chicks. It's things that rhyme or start with the same consonant. Those things ring around in our inner ear over and over, so it penetrates. So that's what I mean by being sticky.
Yeah, well, and that reminds me of another conversation we had when we were talking about music and people writing lyrics. Wasn't it the Beatles that would, if I'm remembering correctly, that they would write a lyric and they couldn't remember it within a certain amount of time.
They dropped it. Right, because it wasn't memorable. Exactly. Okay. And they used to in music call it the old gray whistle theory. And what that means is if you could sing it one time to an old gray-haired man and he walked away whistling your tune, it's a hit.
That makes sense.
But shouldn't our conversations be memorable? In other words, when you leave the conversation, shouldn't they be whistling it in their head? Oh yeah, she said. Because that's what you want. You want to penetrate their heart.
And that's a good way to remember it, because when you've got a song, there's only so many words you can fit into that song in that time frame. Right. And yet they're powerful. I mean, look at the impact of how one song can actually make on a person, a culture, a group of people. And yet it's typically, I mean, most songs are anywhere from a minute and a half to like 3 minutes typically. Right. And so you're getting all the, I mean, think about that. Most speeches in school, in college and things like that so try and give it within 5 minutes.
Right.
And yet I don't remember those speeches nearly as much as I do a song.
Well, you look at the most powerful speeches in history and they're 3 to 5 minutes. They're short and sweet because we can only hold on to so many thoughts at a time. In other words, in sales, I'll teach people, don't say 4 items. Bring up 3. By the time you get to the 4th one, they forgot the first one. The brain can only retain so much information at a time. And so keep it short and keep it simple. Be as crisp and think through the words you're going to use, because just one word alone can have a massive difference. Like a friend of mine wrote a book called, his name is Joe Sugarman. He's the #1 copywriter in the United States and probably in the world. And he said, he wrote a book called Triggers. He said, individual words trigger us different ways for fight or flight. So one company had done that with a billboard. It just said, we repair cars. And then they changed it to we fix cars. And they had a 3 times greater, 300% increase in response to that ad.
Makes sense.
From saying the word fix. Because repairing seems like I'm going to have to keep up with repairs. Yep. Fix means it's done, it's solved, it's over. I want my car to be fixed. That's permanent. Yeah. It's really weird. It's a little thing. But, it's like the difference between the word lightning and lightning bug.
That makes sense. It really does make sense.
Change the meaning.
So what are some of the 3 concepts? Because I know your book is still in progress, and I'm not sure that we have quite of a timeline of when it's going to be finished. You've been working on it 10 years.
Probably 2023. It'll be out in 2023.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, long time coming, which is
10 years.
Right, but I love that.
It's too important.
It is. And, and so with that, in the time that we're waiting, what would be just a reminder of the concepts that you would hope that our audience would try to put in practice or start to learn or figure out how to put in practice?
So there's 3 real important keys to having better communication. And the first is intention. You have to be intentional and intend to be a better communicator. And I would be really specific and say, you know what, in 6 months, I would like to be a far superior communicator. I would like to be exceptional. And then you got to think through, well, if I have that intention, how am I going to get there, right? So then you got to go to the second level. The second is understanding. And that's Solomon's second key to success. You have to have deep understanding. Meaning you've got to study. It's not all locked up in our heads. They didn't give it to us in school. We didn't start with it. you need to research it. So some
Right.
of these topics we'll be posting online, and we'll say, here's an article just on listening. Here's 10 simple things you can do, or here's 3 keys that you can do. So understanding is the second one. So intention, then understanding. Then you've got to put in some effort. You have to, nobody can do your push-ups for you.
Nope.
Right. So you got to do your own work and just start doing it, and then measure the results. Just test it, and that's Solomon's third key to success, and what actually makes things successful. So try it. You just say, you know what? I've been arguing with my child lately. Okay, I'm going to try, and I'm going to measure our conversations. I'm going to see how many of those end in a positive feel and outcome. And then just do it every single time. Just keep a little note. Go, you know what? That one ended great. That was awesome. And then think, well, and then dissect it and go, well, get some understanding. Why did that go that way? Okay, yeah, it probably was my tone. Or maybe I said something and I wasn't as tactful as I could have been.
Or like
Right.
with talking to a child, sometimes you need to explain it differently than you would
Exactly.
think initially.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think that that's kind of what we're doing here is we're explaining things a little differently.
Right.
Because we hear things on the surface level, and you know, and honestly, I'm really glad to have you on the channel here today. You said you mentioned that you have LinkedIn.
Yes.
Where can people find you on LinkedIn?
If you just type in Kirk Heiner, LinkedIn, Heiner,
Okay.
LinkedIn, it'll come up.
Okay. All right. So you've heard it. If you want to follow him on LinkedIn, you can. And we'll be putting out more information as it comes along further when his book comes out. And with that, you can, in the meantime, where can people find your other books that you've...
They are on lulu.com, and if you just type in Solomon's 3 Secrets or the Code of Solomon for Success, and my name, you're going to come up with that. And the other is the Unleashing the Sales Superstar Inside You.
Okay.
And so that's another one you can look up.
All right. Well, that is... Well, thank you again for your time here.
You're very
And I'm
welcome.
really glad to be able to share this with other people. And while you're out there enjoying the holidays with your family and your friends and those you love, just keep in mind that sometimes you might need to take a pause, take a break, think intentionally about what you're trying to communicate, you know, put in practice the things that we've talked about today, and have a better holiday. Because you know what? Life is too short, and as things have taught us in the last few years, you never know how much time you have, and that time with your family and friends is priceless.
Make the important important.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. Again, this is Mindful Connections, Carrie Marie, and guest Kirk Heiner. Have a wonderful holiday.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.